All right, I'll ask you to turn in your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 15. 2 Kings chapter 15. So some of what we'll be talking about tonight deals with some of the things that maybe we want to, as we sang in the song, we want to be able to rise above the world and all of the perils and troubles that come along with being and living this world. And we're going to unfortunately be looking at a lot of some of the evils of this world as they were manifested through the lives of these kings here tonight. And yes, I say kings plural because we're actually going to be talking about 5 of them tonight. But before I do that, I want to test your knowledge, specifically your knowledge about U.S. presidents. So you may see up there the title up there, Chronicles of Conspiracy. So I want to talk specifically about conspiracy to assassinate the leaders of our country. Now, as far as I'm aware, and as long as the sources that I have read are correct, as long as that's correct and I'm correct, there are 4 presidents who have suffered the ultimate fate of an assassination plot and have met their death as a result of that. So I'm going to test you real quick. You could probably name a couple off the top of your head real quick, but maybe you might need to know your history to know a couple of the others. So go ahead and help me out here. So we're looking for 4 of them. We have Abraham Lincoln. Yep. JFK. William McKinley. Good. There's one more. He's maybe about 20 years earlier. Garfield. Yeah, James Garfield. So those 4 presidents all were victims of assassination plots that were successfully carried out. Now, there are several others that we could talk about where plots were foiled or, but as we even witnessed last year, an attempt on then not sitting but now sitting President Trump, an attempt on his life. We've seen it in our day. Ronald Reagan, maybe you're familiar with his escape from an assassination plot, as well as there are others we could talk about going back to, I'm trying to think of his name, he's in the 1800s. Yeah, Gerald Ford. Yeah, there are dozens of plots out there. Even Wikipedia has a lot of this information correct. So that's and kind of tongue-in-cheek in saying that because, Wikipedia. But at the same time, you've helped me to confirm some of that information. Now, what we're looking at tonight in 2 Kings chapter 15 is kind of a whole host of these conspiracies that end up being the end of the lives of some of these kings. In fact, all of them either were the victims of a plot or were the perpetrators of a plot or both. So all 5 of the people that we're looking at tonight, that would be true of them. And as one person pointed out as I read, this is Israel's most unstable time since the death of King Baasha, which is all the way back towards the beginning of the divided kingdom. He was like the 2nd or 3rd king of the northern kingdom once the kingdom split. And there was a time like that. In fact, before what we're talking about tonight, as far as I'm aware, as long as I have done my research properly, there are only 3 times in the entire rest of the history of the northern kingdom and the divided kingdom where this was something like this happened. 3 times. And tonight, 4 out of our 5 were perpetrators of those kinds of plots. Only one person we're looking at tonight actually lived to the completion of his days and died a natural death. But we'll get to that when they come. As we go through these, there will be a little bit of overlap as we talk about people, because as you'll see that these kind of go in quick succession of this person did this to this person. And so as I'm talking about one person, we'll already be starting to talk about the next person. So the way I've divided it up is kind of how the chronicler of Kings here has organized it, giving that general introduction, how this king reigned at this time and was this old. So kind of going off of some of those details is where I'm beginning each section here, even though you might see the person's name come up before that. So first of all, tonight we're going to be looking at a man named Zechariah. Now, Zechariah was probably a very common name, but in this case, he's the name of one of the kings that we're looking at. There's a well, you might know a prophet named Zechariah, which is different, but Zechariah, maybe you've seen his name elsewhere in Scripture related to other people. Let's look at 2 Kings chapter 15, and we'll begin reading at verse number 8. Looking at Zechariah at the end of Jehu's promise, verse 8, it says there, "In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, did Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, reign over Israel in Samaria 6 months. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, as his fathers had done. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. And Shallum, the son of Jabesh, conspired against him, and smote him before the people, and slew him, and reigned in his stead. And the rest of the acts of Zechariah, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. This was the word of the Lord which he spake to Jehu, saying, Thy sons shall sit on the throne of Israel unto the 4th generation, and so it came to pass." So looking at Zechariah here, Zechariah, I want to get the right vowel in there, Z-A-C-H, and the rest of his name. So in those verses, as we go through each person, I won't, well, hopefully not spend a whole lot of time there, but I want to point out some facts that are perhaps unique to some of these kings, is there are a lot of things here which are very common among them. One of them being what we read in verse number 9. You look at the end of verse number 9, and this is something that you see with a lot of the kings of the northern kingdom, especially some of the ones of the southern kingdom, as they sometimes adopt the ways of the northern kings. But this fact that he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam. And there's that similar refrain that you see just about every time you see that mentioned. So and again, 4 of these kings, that is true of them. So I'll just let you know that in advance here, but I'll mention the others as we come to them. One other note about him, which is somewhat unique. Look in verse number 10. So we already see Shallum. By the way, Shallum is the next king we'll look at, but here he's in this case the one who conspired against him to take his life. So Shallum got rid of Zechariah. And one thing to note in verse number 10, it says he smote him before the people. Now, sometimes things like this are done in secret. Maybe think back to days of the judges and I guess thinking of the left-handed judge who came in secretly to that king and did him in. In this case, when it says there, it slew him before the people, he did this in broad daylight. He did it in front of the people. So everyone there was watching, and some of these assassination attempts that we talked about tonight were done in plain sight, outside of hotels or other places of public gathering where there's a big get-together of some kind. So that's kind of how this happened here. Zechariah met his fate in front of everyone. Everyone was watching. They had no shame in doing what they did to take this person's life. One other notable fact about this we see in verse number 12, referring to a prophecy which was given to Jehu. So I'd like to turn back maybe a couple pages, whatever it is for you. Look at 2 Kings chapter 10, verse number 30. Chapter 10, verse number 30, it says there, "And the Lord said unto Jehu, Because thou hast done well in executing that which is right in mine eyes, and hast done unto the house of Ahab according to all that was in mine heart, thy children of the 4th generation shall sit on the throne of Israel." That was the promise given to Jehu in return for what he did. And I think I mentioned this when I talked about Jehu. He was, in my opinion, I think he was one of the closest people that the northern kingdom ever had to a good king. You see it kind of mentioned in the verse there. How many of the kings of the northern kingdom, something good is said about them? It's pretty rare. But in this case, the Lord's commending him for what he did in executing judgment against the house of Ahab. Now, Jehu, after that point, decided he wasn't going to be faithful to follow the Lord. So like all the others of the northern kingdom, he did that which was evil in the eyes of the Lord. And that's the same epitaph that we see with a lot of them. But there was this promise given that the children up to his 4th generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. Now, maybe I won't quiz you on all of their names. We already talked about some U.S. presidents we might be familiar with, but maybe less familiar with some of the descendants of Jehu. So those would be, I'm trying to think of them. I can't quite remember them. There's Jehoash, not not Joash, although you could call him Joash. This gets really confusing. You have Jeroboam II. You have Zechariah, who's mentioned here, and then also I had this Jehoahaz. All right, so Jehoahaz, Jehoash, Jeroboam II, and Zechariah. So those are the 4 generations after Jehu that were promised to Jehu. And if there's one positive thing that we can take from this, look at the end of verse number 12, and so it came to pass. And with that, we get the reminder, as we should, for things that are said of God in Scripture, that if God says it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Now, this is kind of a negative context, but positive maybe you can take from that is you can trust God's word. If it says something, you can trust that it's reliable, believable, and if it's specifically, in the case of prophecy, if God said it's going to happen, it will happen. We're waiting for things to happen in the future yet that God has said will happen through His prophets, and those things will happen. So that's Zechariah for you at the end of Jehu's promise. Second person, as I've already mentioned, is Shallum. Go back to our text in chapter 15, and I've subtitled his section here, Along the Path of the Slain. We'll start reading in verse number 13. Shallum, the son of Jabesh, began to reign in the 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, and he reigned a full month in Samaria. For Menahem, the son of Gadi, went up from Tirzah and came to Samaria, and smote Shallum, the son of Jabesh, in Samaria, and slew him and reigned in his stead. And the rest of the acts of Shallum and his conspiracy which he made, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Then Menahem smote Tifsah, and all that were therein, and the coast thereof from Tirzah, because they opened not to him. Therefore he smote it, and all the women therein that were with child he ripped up. Verses 13 through 16 there, looking at Shallum. Again, as I've said, there's some bleed over as far as the kings and their interactions, but I bring up what happened there in verse 16. It's hard to even think of, and I could maybe hear some gasps from you thinking about what happened there. Some things to note about Shallum here. Actually, if you note in verse number 13 there, at the end of that, he reigned a full month. Maybe think of how long is a month? You got your 28 to 31 days, depending on which month it is for us here. This is actually the second shortest reign out of any of the kings. Right here is one measly month he was in power, and it's already over for him. Now, maybe in saying this, I'm kind of using my glorified imagination a little bit, but I kind of see this Menahem here as kind of a man on a journey, a man on a mission. And we see him here in verse number 14. By the way, he's the next king, so if you want to write his name down. Menahem, the son of Gadi, went up from Tirzah, came to Samaria, and he seems like a man on the move who has an agenda in mind, and he's trying to accomplish this. We can talk about maybe motivations. We don't always have the exact motivations here, but he seems like he was pretty motivated in one way or another to come to this point to take the king's life here. And then to do what is said of in verse 16 here, which I really don't even want to say the words to repeat it, but people were brutalized as a result of what we see in verse 16 there, kind of the circumstances. These people, as he's now taken the life of this other king, he's wanting to be recognized as the true king. But these people, they don't accept him. That's kind of the long and short of verse 16 there. But because they're not accepting him, they close their gates to him and not letting him in. He decides he's just going to sack the town and then brutalizes the people that are there. And maybe thinking about some of what's mentioned at the end of verse 16 there. Are there some maybe modern social issues that we might think of when it relates to that kind of a thing? Maybe with abortion, things like that. We deal with some of these things today. It may not be a one-to-one example, but at the same time, a lot in this world hasn't changed as far as the wickedness that we see in it. That's really kind of Shallum in a nutshell there. All right, so going on to king number 3 tonight, as I've warned about Menahem. Menahem we have starting in verse number 17, well, at least the part that I begin as far as the chronicle of his life, so we'll start reading there. Chapter 15, verse 17. In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, began Menahem, the son of Gadi, to reign over Israel, and reigned 10 years in Samaria. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not all his days from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. And Pul, the king of Assyria, came against the land. And Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hand might be with him to confirm the kingdom in his hand. And Menahem exacted the money of Israel, even of all the mighty men of wealth, of each man 50 shekels of silver, to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned back and stayed not there in the land. And the rest of the acts of Menahem and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Menahem slept with his fathers, and Pekahiah his son reigned in his stead. We see from verse 22, he's the one of these 5 here that actually died a natural death, as far as we can see. But again, he was one of the ones conspiring against Shallum, his predecessor. We see it noted of him here. He's another one of the ones where the sins of Jeroboam are mentioned on him. Shallum was the one who was not guilty of that, as we see from the words that we read there. We see some of the beginnings of what is going to happen to the northern kingdom here, with Assyria now being a little bit of a pest to them. This is really just the beginning. This assault that's being made, it says in verse 19, they came against the land. Menahem's idea was, well, maybe I don't have any other kinds of resources militarily to solve this problem, so I'm just going to throw some money at it. Maybe you've heard about that in certain contexts here today, where if a company or a person has a problem and they're well-to-do, then they, as the Bible might say, they trust in their riches, they throw their money at the problem. And so here Menahem is throwing his money at this issue. I've subtitled this section, Enacting Taxation for Bribery. And some of the commentaries backed me up in some of that wording, especially as far as the bribery goes, when it mentions there in verse 17 that he gave him that 1,000 talents of silver. There's some motive behind that. Where did he get this money from? It's mentioned in verse number 20. He exacted the money of Israel. That basically means he just took it. He was taking it from the people. And look at this especially here. Even of all the mighty men of wealth. Is that a narrative that we see today in certain ideologies that we hear of, where we want to tax the rich? They're not doing their fair share. And guess what? I'm going to say it again, but there's nothing new here. Menahem did it here. He thought he could get money out of those rich folks to be able to pay for this. Hey, Assyria, here's 1,000 talents of silver. You want to not invade us? And he's like, okay, I'll take your 1,000 talents of silver. So I'm kind of acting out maybe an exchange of bribery there. So I mean, again, my glorified information, kind of imagining how that might have played out. Some verses for us to think of as we think about this issue of trusting in your riches. We could go to a number of them, I'm sure. First one I'll go to is Proverbs chapter 11, verse number 4. Proverbs 11, verse 4 says, riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivereth from death. Hey, he was facing the wrath of Assyria. They were coming against the land. In fact, we're going to see what happens later on in our narrative here. But they profit not in the day of wrath. Well, I mean, yeah, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up. This is only a temporary solution for his problem. Because ultimately, I mean, if he had been a king that did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, maybe he could have avoided that invasion by Assyria, and God wouldn't have sent them against him. If maybe he had changed his ways and said, you know what, I'm not going to go against what God says. I'm going to forsake these idols of Jeroboam. I'm going to change the ways of our nation, and then righteousness would deliver him from death, and also his nation as well. In that case, let's look at another passage, Psalm 52, verse 7. I'm back a little ways here, kind of creeping back toward 2 Kings. Psalm 52, verse number 7. This might be a way you would describe Menahem here. Lo, this is the man that made not God his strength, but trusted in the abundance of his riches, and strengthened himself in his wickedness. He trusted in that 1,000 talents of silver that he exacted from his people, now is giving that to this foreign nation to get them off his back, maybe to earn favor with them, and strengthen himself in his wickedness. Hey, this will solve my problem so that I can continue with my idol worship. I'm going to continue in the sins of Jeroboam, and I'm going to let my riches help me out in this situation. But that's a lesson for us that that's not something that we can trust in. Tonight, when we go to our prayer time, when we did that, we were acknowledging the one who is able to solve problems maybe like what he would be facing here. Getting our hearts right, first of all, but then from that point, hey, we've got these problems. We're going to take them to the Lord. We're going to trust the Lord with that. That's not what Menahem did here. He was trusting in his riches. So back in our text in 2 Kings chapter 15, we've already seen the name of his successor. This is a son of his that gets to sit on the throne. We'll start reading in verse 23. Pekahiah, who I have labeled as a victim of power in numbers. I tried to have a little bit of fun with some of these, but best I could do with this one, so I'm sorry if it's not good enough. Pekahiah. We'll start reading in verse 23. In the 50th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekahiah the son of Menahem began to reign over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 2 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. But Pekah the son of Remaliah, a captain of his, conspired against him and smote him in Samaria in the palace of the king's house, with Argob and Ariah, and with him 50 men of the Gileadites. And he killed him and reigned in his room. And the rest of the acts of Pekahiah and all that he did, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. So Pekahiah, not to be confused with Pekah here, who would be the next one, a victim of power and numbers. Not a whole lot to really say about him, and I kind of feel like that in talking about a lot of these kings, because like I've mentioned, you see a lot of the same kind of things happening, and I feel like a broken record sometimes. But some distinguishing things that we see about this particular scenario. Looking at verse 25, this Pekah was a captain of his. This would be someone of his that he might trust. This would be someone who would be close to him. Yeah, maybe think back to some of those assassination plots that we talked about, and how many of those scenarios, or maybe think of other types of assassination plots. How many of those people were perhaps close to, in some way, the person that they were trying to assassinate? Maybe think of the Ides of March, et tu, Brute, someone who is supposed to be close in that narrative of that Caesar. So this captain turned on him. I think of World War II. There were also a number of plots against Hitler, and some of the plots that some of the insurgency groups and the resistance groups put up, they were trying to find people inside the system to help them to be able to accomplish their task of getting rid of Hitler. They were almost successful once in 1944, but there were a number of times that they tried and ultimately failed. And it wasn't until the actual, initially the Russian invasion of Berlin in May of 45 that he ended up taking his own life. But there were plots to assassinate him even years before that, even before the actual World War started, and the German nation with the Nazi regime was getting going. Another thing to note, back in our text here, 2 Kings 15, another distinguishing fact about this particular conspiracy, smote him in Samaria in the palace of the king's house. And when I was reading about that, people talked about how this is supposed to be one of the most secure locations in the king's house, that this area would be, maybe think of like you'd be having all of your secret service around you. It was protected. And again, this is somebody you would think you would trust. And so he had no problem being able to get to that inner sanctuary of the king's palace, to this inner palace, where you would think there would be some safety. And yet in that place of safety, this king ended up meeting his end. So looking now at our last king for tonight, looking at Pekah, who really is kind of a harbinger, did I say that word right? Of things to come. I call him a witness of captivity's beginning. And that is going to be the ultimate end of the northern kingdom. I won't be talking about that this week. That's really kind of a whole study in itself when we get to that. But looking at Pekah now, these are the birth pangs, if you will, of what is going to happen. Back in our text now, verse number 27. In the 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah the son of Remaliah began to reign over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 20 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon and Abel-Beth-Maacah, and Genoa, and Kedesh, and Hazor, and Gilead, and Galilee, and all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria. And Hoshea, the son of Elah, made a conspiracy against Pekah, the son of Remaliah, and smote him and slew him, and reigned in his stead in the 20th year of Jotham, the son of Uzziah. And the rest of the acts of Pekah, and all that he did, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Once again with Pekah here, just like with a number of the others, we see him as a perpetrator of the sins of Jeroboam. Also, out of all of these, one thing to note is that he actually reigned the longest out of all of them, 20 years. Some of them, at least in the commentaries that I read, mentioned that there may have been some overlap with him, as he was this one who was a captain who was opposing him, that maybe he had his own following for a while, and that was composed of that 20 years. I can't really say that for sure, but those are some of the things that people say. But dealing with the captivity here, so what were some of the details of the captivity happening here? So verse 29, mentioning Tiglath-Pileser, that's how I'm pronouncing it. So if you pronounce it differently, I'm sorry. Some would say that's actually the same one as was mentioned earlier, Pul. That Pul was kind of a more personal name, while Tiglath-Pileser was kind of a more formal name for this king. There's, I think, only one commentary that said otherwise. Most of them seem to agree that this is the same person. And then he took all these places. Now, I won't make you try to pronounce those places, but again, the long and the short of this is that this is kind of around the northern region, northern part of the northern kingdom. And so all of these places that are mentioned kind of fall in that kind of northeastern part of the northern kingdom. And that's where Assyria is starting. My hand should be over here. If that's north, this would be east, right? So coming in kind of from this way, and then kind of starting to work his way down. So these are the places that are beginning to be taken. Now he's murdered by this conspirator Hoshea, who will be the subject of our next study. So next week my goal is to complete our study of at least the northern kingdom. So at the end of the month, I'll be able to say I finished something. But that's what you have to look forward to. And if you wanted to read ahead, that's in chapter 17. So all of chapter 17 is what I'll be looking at next week as we look at Hoshea and some of the details concerning not only him, but really kind of giving an overall chronicle of what brought the northern kingdom to this point, and giving a little bit of a history lesson there.